Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, April 25th, 2025, and today we're going to talk about my biggest aha moments as a farmer, the creation care movement in churches, and it's Feedback Friday, so let's do it. All right, y'all. Well, welcome to Friday. I hope everyone has had a successful week, however you may define that. Mine was moderately productive. Did some washing and packing yesterday in the morning, and for an order that we had, then some seeding in the afternoon, basically lettuce every week from now on. The garden got a nice dose of rain in the evening, so things are happy and jamming out there. Gonna be nearly 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 32 degrees Celsius next week. But I swear it's a trick. Blackberry winter likes its 15 minutes of fame every year. So I'm just gonna be cautious with field planting until around May 10th, despite this warm spring that we're having so far. Anyway, it is Friday, which means Feedback Friday, where we explore what you all were saying about this week's topics. On Monday, I mentioned that I killed nearly all of my grafted cucumbers, and at LKSF9820 wrote, quote, "It's really not clear how you managed to kill all of your cucumbers," end quote. Okay, so just in case there were others who were like, what happened here? Basically, when you graft any plant, there's a period of time that it must heal. In general, same as tomatoes, which I described in an earlier episode, and I've been successfully doing for several years now, that healing process requires a few days in the dark, in high humidity, for the top part, the scion, to attach to the bottom, the rootstock. That takes about 5 to 7 days. Then you have to very gradually, over the course of about 4 to 5 days, introduce light. For the cucumbers, what effectively happened was I tried to rush every step by a day or two. So instead of giving them like 5 days in the dark, I gave them 3. Then instead of roughly 4 days getting increasingly more light, I gave them like 2.5. So what resulted when I moved them out to the greenhouse was plants that did not quite get the adequate time to heal, and so the graft failed. 2, not 1 like I originally thought, did vaguely survive. So if I can keep those alive, which is still very much in the if category, but I'm trying. If I can keep those alive, I will plant those with the ungrafted plants from the same batch for a very small and somewhat weird, not very helpful comparison. So in short, I basically just cooked a bunch of plants that were only halfway healed. On Tuesday, we discussed the concept of letting the water in, where I talked about the Dutch approach to rising seawaters over there in the Netherlands, where, yes, part of it is blocking the water out, but also part of it is just allowing the water to come into the Netherlands and figure out ways to utilize it and live with the water more. I mentioned our children with the video games, like just how much of a force that is one way I have found this concept analogous to just life. And several people commented on that. And yeah, screen time and kids is one way I've thought about where this idea is applicable. But also this week I've thought of other ways in which this quote unquote letting the water in idea kind of comes into play, like the living pathways that I talked about on Thursday, right? Nature wants to grow where there is bare soil. So just by choosing the nature we want to grow there and kind of letting it do its thing instead of battling, we're kind of just letting the water in, so to speak. Or like with soccer coaching, kids want to just have fun, and I want to teach kids how to play soccer. So by turning the drills into games and competitions, we both kind of get what we want. Like it's not about accepting something you don't like or don't want around. Letting the water in is about working with inevitable, really strong forces to find a middle ground so you're not just constantly battling. It's working with it, but also maybe turning that force, weeds or water or a kid's desire to play or whatever it is, to your advantage, aiming it towards your goals. Anyway, I'd love to hear more examples of how this idea resonates in your own lives. On Wednesday, we talked about rocks in the garden, somehow for the first time in, I don't know, some like 135 episodes or whatever it is. And I liked this from at Doug Glibby 4776, who wrote, quote, "You might be able to turn those rocks into income. I live in Maine, and we are known for having plentiful quantities of fieldstone in our soil. A friend of mine drove past a field where a man was tilling a large piece of land, and he could see the area littered with large fieldstone. My friend stopped by, offered the man a significant amount of money per trailer full of fieldstone that he dug and loaded. People love fieldstone rock walls and are always looking for sources of fieldstone. Just a thought." End quote. Thanks, Doug. I think that's totally a possibility. I used a lot of the rocks that we had on our old farm that we dig up to hold down tarps and, I don't know, various other places. And I also stacked a bunch of them in the greenhouse to help retain that heat. Also, that farm had an old stone wall lining the property that was no doubt built from rocks removed from nearby fields. Maybe the rocks could be incorporated into a patio or something as well. Rocks are annoyingly heavy, but if they could have a second purpose or income for you, that would make it at least a little bit more worth the work. Then, yesterday, we talked about the first tools someone might need, and Bill Price, 4209, suggested, quote, some thoughts on first tools. Consider used tools. There are the usual sources like classifieds, notice boards at farm stores or Craigslist, but also look for estate auctions. Yard sales are online for homesteaders groups locally. The latter has helped us get rid of items many times. You might also find neighbors in the same boat who would share the costs of larger items or lend them out. The homestead peeps are often receptive to bartering for things if you have goods or services that you can offer, end quote. So thanks, Bill. And yeah, once you have your full tool list, you can probably find people in the area who are selling, a lot of what you need. We used to have a neighbor, in fact, who was constantly going to auctions and would ask us all the time what to be on the lookout for. If we were looking for a shovel or something, we'd just mention it and he would find one. And he would buy it, and then we'd buy it back from him if we liked it. And if we didn't want it or didn't need it, that was no big deal to him, because he would just do this huge yard sale. It like goes up an entire road here in Kentucky that stretches across the state every year. As a side hustle. So it worked out for him, worked out for both parties. So shouts to the late, great Sam Holder. Anyway, great stuff as always, friends. Also, I wanted to add that I got a nice email from someone named Amy last week, gently reminding me to make sure people didn't throw the USDA employees under the bus for the canceled contracts, and that these are obviously like top-down decisions, not unilateral decisions from the employees, and certainly not decisions those employees are all necessarily super pumped about. Now, I don't think that anyone is blaming the employees, but I'm sure they are going through a rough transition as well, and they've been a valuable resource to us and many other growers over the years. So shouts to those folks for all their work. I know it's harder than it probably seems. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, some of my biggest aha moments as a grower. BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by FarmRaise. Still using QuickBooks for your farm's bookkeeping? You're wasting time and losing money. Farm finances can be overwhelming, but they don't have to be. FarmRaise Tracks is the all-in-one tool built just for farmers. Manage expenses, prep for taxes, run payroll, and plan for the future without spreadsheets or stress. Just clear, organized insights to keep your operation thriving. Thousands of farmers trust Tracks to make smart financial decisions all year long. It's time you did too. Use code NOTIL20, that's all caps, no spaces, NOTIL20 for 20% off the life of your membership at farmraise.com. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere the questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Dan Gorman. Quote, hey, Jesse, really appreciate the wealth of knowledge you've shared over the years. I have a training wheels farm, aka backyard garden, and have been working to implement the techniques/methods you describe. Last year, I saw an abundance of cabbage moths, but very little resulting damage from them. Maybe the flowers I had planted were attracting enough predatory wasps. Maybe I just got lucky. My question is, if you had an aha moment in your farming career where it seemed like things were falling into place with your systems. I'm curious what clued you in. Was it the texture of your soil, or maybe seeing a tomato hornworm covered in wasp eggs? Thanks again, end quote. Okay, Dan, cool to hear about the cabbage moths and fun questions here. To start, it is hard to say what the cabbage moth success story is about, but my guess, just based on experience in my own farm and others, is a combo of good soil and ecological help. That's usually the way it goes, like I discussed the other day on the broccoli episode. So great work. Very cool to hear those success stories. Absolutely love that. As for my favorite aha moments, I'm sure longtime followers of our work will be familiar with most of them, if not all of them, as I'm not modest enough to not talk about literally every success and failure I have. But a few come to mind. One of them definitely came from wasps when I saw a wasp eating a cabbage worm. I've talked about that before for sure and shown that clip that is one of my most prized possessions. But now anytime I see a pest, I look around to see what else is flying around and crawling around it and eating it. And especially wasps. If I see a wasp going from plant to plant, I'm always following it and trying to figure out what it's doing. I think with the wasp, it was like, here is this creature that I figured had some ecological benefit beyond stinging me, but that I mostly viewed as an annoyance, literally eating one of our biggest pests. I'm now a big fan of wasps. I enjoy the relationship we build in a season where when they set up in a place I travel often, like my tool shed, they don't bother me at all because they are used to seeing me and I leave them alone and they leave me alone. I would like them to learn to eat harlequin beetles though, just haven't had the guts to bring it up. Grafting tomatoes was another big aha moment for me for just how much better they did than our regular ungrafted tomatoes. It's a lot of work and may not be worth it in every context, but I was truly stunned at how much more productive they were. Also, the approach I talked about recently to, sweet potato slips, where I am using very small slips with almost no roots on them, and how that almost 100% cured our scurf issue. It was like night and day. The potatoes just had no scurf on them. Another big aha moment was recognizing just how much easier carrots were to harvest if I broad forked the bed first, and how much time that saved me, plus how much happier those carrots seemed to be. Remembering, of course, that we are on pretty dense soil, but we often get caught up in this like tillage versus no tillage debate. And no doubt I can be put at the blame of some of that for the title of this organization. But there are crops that frankly just do a little better and are a little easier with a small calculated amount of disturbance. So most vegetables are recovery species. That's kind of what they do. So my opinion on disturbance has changed, I guess, and we're going to actually talk about that next week. Moisture and mulch was another aha moment. We went through a really hot, hard drought a few years back, and the only place I could find any real moisture after several weeks of scorching heat and no rain was under the hay mulch, where plants were just cranking away, happy and healthy. Like, I knew mulch was helpful, but to see it straight up thriving in a dry farming scenario, densely packed with plants, while everything else around it suffered, was pretty clarifying, just how effective a well-applied mulch can be. Also, I think that just how much time no tilling and thus not cultivating all the time saved me, and how much more fun it has made this job. Certainly, there are times when the way that I decided to go about a specific task is actually slower, like I talked about with the celery earlier this week or last week. But by and large, what I found is not only more consistent, healthier produce, but a happier life as a farmer. When we first ventured out on our own and I was cultivating until dark every single day, I did not see how I or anyone else could sustain a farm. It just flat out did not make sense to me. It didn't add up. No-till and low-till methods in that way weren't just an aha moment, but a business-saving reality for us. Speaking of that, I do have some like business aha moments too, like really getting some good numbers down and realizing certain crops or clients didn't actually make sense for us. Or sometimes Hannah and I will just ask ourselves what we are enjoying and what is bringing us stress and joy, and then really dig into that and why. And if there's a simple solution, that comes down a lot to our holistic goals. But sometimes it's just like, do we still like doing the farmer's market? And what would it look like if we stopped doing it? With that particular example, we realized that the farmer's market was basically covering an employee's compensation for the year and making like an extra $10,000 or $15,000 for us for the season. So could we just find that $10,000 or $15,000 somewhere else? We haven't fully achieved that yet, but we have our weekends to go spend with the kids or go to soccer games or coach soccer or just like hang out, rest, which is cool, which feels, I don't know, equally as profitable. I've also had a lot of false aha moments, successes or ideas that maybe worked once but couldn't quite be replicated. I think of the double seeding idea where I was sowing two crops in the same block to get two different crops with half the work of planting, because you are just planting one block by hand with two crops in it. And it sort of worked, but was really hard to dial in. No doubt, as I think of more, I will talk more about them here. What were your aha moments? Let us know. Thanks for the question, as always, Patreon members. And make sure to keep them coming on the April and soon to be May, unbelievably, show thread. Up next, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, churches that farm. Be right back. Today's episode is also brought to you by Farmhand. I started a CSA to grow food and build community, not to drown in admin work. Spreadsheets, emails, and pack lists take up too much time. If I could spend less time at my desk and more in the field, that'd be a win. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand automates billing, newsletters, websites, and member support, saving CSA farmers 20 plus hours a week. Focus on farming, not paperwork. See how Farmhand can help. Book a one-on-one demo with founder Ari at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. All right, so I was reading this article the other day in the New York Times by Katrine Einhorn about these churches in Indiana and movements within the church at large that are centered on what they dub creation care, viewing it as their duty to care for the earth. And it's something that I've seen kind of trickling in a little bit here and there, where churches are engaging more with agriculture and ecology and the environment. An example being that video we did about Jackson's Garden, Apostles Garden, down in Bowling Green last year, where they basically built a farm at their church, which is very cool to see. The article that I'm talking about discussed this group of churches in Indiana who are doing things like installing solar panels on the church, building gardens, planting native perennials for beneficials, and making natural play areas for kids. Now, to be clear, I'm not going to get into theology or where churches' obligations are to nature or any of that. Rather, I wanted to bring this up because the enormous potential for this sort of shift in thinking and obligation to the natural world within churches, not only for the environment, and communities, but also for the simple fact that churches own a lot of really, really awesome farmland that respectfully often just kind of sits there. I cannot tell you how many churches in Kentucky I drive by on a near daily basis and drool over the large, flat, wide open pastures they generally just mow for the 1 or 2 events they have per season where it gets used, which is fine. I'm not judging churches for that. Lots of people and businesses and organizations have land that they do even less with, but churches are among the biggest landowners in the country and world, and much of that land could be utilized in really amazing agricultural and ecological ways. The Catholic Church alone, which shouts to the late Pope Francis, according to Yale, controls around 177 million acres around the world. Now, not all of that is farmable land, obviously, but even if half of that is arable, that's the equivalent of 1.5 million of my farm, if you include my house, my buildings, and the land I don't use to grow on, but use for ecology. And that's just the Catholic Church alone. That's not the Baptist, the Methodist, the Mormon, or non-denominational churches, etc. So anyway, I think that's a very cool thing that's happening, and it's cool to hear, and I hope that movement continues to grow. And I'd love to hear from people whose churches are doing interesting ecological creation care type things. Maybe it's community gardens, or maybe it's production farms, farmer incubators, which I think would be really awesome, or food bank style gardens. But maybe it's just permaculture style perennial plantings that require little attention, but give the church some harvestable fruits and a nice place to hang out. I'd love to hear what you all are seeing, and would be cool to see this movement kind of grow and spread. I think of people like Howard Allen working on his church land out there in the Triangle in North Carolina called Faithful Farms, among others that I've heard of over the years. Anyway, again, that's all very cool stuff that I would love to see more of. And otherwise, I guess I'm going to leave it there for the week. Yeah, let's go start our weekend on that sort of positive and hopeful note. Good luck to all of your sports teams, as long as they are not playing mine. Also, I'm enjoying that series from the New York Times called 50 States, 50 Solutions. So it's worth checking out the different environmental things that various states are doing. Before we head out for the week, though, a quick word from our friends at Rimmel Greenhouses. Whether you're growing tomatoes for market, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a high tunnel protected from the weather provides the right environment for a harvest you can count on. Rimmel Greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality you need to grow productively year-round. The team of experts at Rimmel Greenhouse Systems will be your trusted partners to ensure you get exceptional value from your greenhouse or high tunnel investment. Visit Rimmel.com today to get growing. Don't forget, we at No Till Growers are now officially a 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. We actually had a couple come in this week, which is super appreciated. Learn more about all that in the show notes. Please make sure to like and subscribe and/or follow wherever you are getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. If you're watching on YouTube, you can always kick us a super thanks. That's very much appreciated. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. If you've ever thought, man, I'd like to sponsor a show, that sounds fun, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and to the team at No Till Growers for their support. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or the Seed Farmer over at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of April, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Patrick Weaver. Shouts to Patrick Weaver, because Patrick is going to save our story for the week. All right, so our wizard, Razzle Dazzle, is standing at a shack at the edge of town in our alternate dimension, where the crops are going haywire in this alternate dimension. And for instance, the plants that usually grow pinball machines are growing Walkmans, which is not helpful on basically any level. And so when the wizard enters the shack and he finds the town's seed farmer, Dennis, seems like a good seed farmer name, in front of a giant pile of seeds. It turns out that Dennis had accidentally dropped all the seeds, mixing up all the seeds in his collection, and embarrassed, just kind of repackaged them and gave them to the townspeople, hoping that they would get what they wanted. Now, both Dennis and the wizard felt like that story was not very interesting, so they concocted an alternate story where Dennis was forced by the neighboring unicorns to mix up the seeds. They were pleased with this idea, except that then the village wanted to attack the unicorns, so they had to tell the truth, and the moral of the story being sometimes the truth is just boring. And so that's it for this week's movie, Cleanup on Aisle 5. We'll be back Monday with a new story. Thanks for watching and/or listening. Have a great weekend.